Canto 6, 1. Doomed is the wretch who thinks that he can hide all traces of the crime he has committed. For if all else is dumb, it will be cried upon the air or from the depths admitted. And God himself events will sometimes guide, so that the sinner by the sins outwitted, and inadvertently, without being asked, he gives himself away and is unmasked. 2. That malefactor, Polonicio, thought he'd covered every vestige of his crime, and of his one accomplice he had sought to rid himself for ever in good time. The second subterfuge it was which brought to pass the sequel, which defeated him. This might have been avoided, but he spurred too eagerly, and thus his death incurred. 3. Friends, dukedom, life he lost at one fell blow, and what is worse, he died in dire disgrace. Now, as I said, they cannot wait to know who the strange knight may be whom none can place. At last he pulls his helmet off to show to everyone's surprise the well-loved face of rlnd, mourned by every Scot who heard the story of his tragic lot. For that rlnd, for whom so many cry, for whom Generva broken-hearted is, the king, the court, his brother, not an eye that has not wept for valor such as his. They wonder, was the traveller's tale a lie? No, it is true that from a precipice he saw him make his tragic leap head first, and naturally had presumed the worst. 5. As often happens when a man's despair so drives him that his mind on death is set, but when he sees it, harsh and fierce, draw near, he finds some recompense in living yet. So rlnd saw the matter clear. Once in the sea, his mood changed to regret. Exerting all his courage as of yore, he swam with mighty strokes to reach the shore. 6. He now despised the impulse which possessed him. The urge to end his life he scorned as mad. And, once on land, where no one could have guessed him, in his wet clothes, the only ones he had, he walked until he came where he might rest him, finding a hermit in a cell who bade him welcome, while for a while incognito he tarried, for he thought his host might know. 7. How the princess the tragic news had taken, whether of joy or sadness, she gave sign, hearing that by such sorrow she was shaken, her very life was threatened with decline. He wondered if perhaps he was mistaken. This made him the more bitterly repine, regretting that his brother had denounced her before her father, and unchaste pronounced her. 8. And he conceived for him as deep a hate, as ardent as his love for the princess. He did not want him thus to vindicate his honor by a deed so merciless. And when he heard that there was none to date who offered to defend her in distress, since many cavaliers were hesitant to challenge one so strong and militant. 9. For many held Lucerno to be so skilled in single combat that none dared to place himself in mortal jeopardy, or if his prowess were in doubt, none cared to take the risk. Thus the majority of cavaliers this hesitation shared. He, having in his mind all this revolved, to fight against his brother, then resolved. 10. Alas, he thought, that the princess should meet her end because of my calamities. How bitter and acute were my regret if she should die before my own demise. She is my lady and my goddess yet. She is the dayspring of my very eyes. So, right or wrong, I must take up my shield in her defense and die upon the field. 11. Shall I defend the wrong? So let it be, so let me die, since little do I care, save that, on my defeat, the penalty of death must then be paid by one so fair. There is this single recompense for me, that she before the end will be aware how ill by Polonicio she was loved, since to her aid that coward has not moved. 12. But I, to whom she gave such great offence, when the encounter ends she will soon know, shall have laid down my life in her defence, and on my brother, by the self-same blow, I'll be revenged for giving such offence to one I love so well. because his foe, whom he'd have slain to vindicate his brother, will be discovered to have been none other. 13. Thus, turning matters over in his mind, with little common sense, I may well owe, some new accoutrements he meant to find, new arms, new horse, new shields, bordered green and yellow, sable the rest, a surcoat of the like kind. Meeting by chance a squire, he takes the fellow to attend him, and rides off to all unknown, to fight against his brother, as I've shown. 14. I've told you how the sequel went, and how, as rlnd, he is known once more. The king by this is as delighted now as by his daughter's rescue just before. She could not find a truer lover, I vow. His ardor will not wane, of that I'm sure. Thus the king mused, for, thinking she defended, yet her good name in combat he defended. 15. So, as he loved his daughter tenderly, he yielded to the pressure of the court, and to Rinaldo's most insistent plea, he gladly named the champion her consort, creating him the Duke of Albany, succeeding Polinicio, for, in short, the dukedom falling vacant when he died, it was bestowed in dowry on the bride. 16. Rinaldo for Dalinda begged for grace, since little in this evil plot she'd done, and, weary of the world and all its ways, she vowed to seek admission as a nun, somewhere in Denmark, where she'd end her days, and very soon from Scotland she was gone. But let us once again Ruggiero find, who on the hippogriff flies like the wind. 17. He was a valiant cavalier, I know, stalwart and brave, and yet it's my belief, although of calm he made an outward show, within his heart was trembling like a leaf. He'd passed the whole of Europe long ago, and, heading ever west, the hippogriff, beyond the pillars fixed by Hercules, had ventured over the forbidden seas. 18. That strange, enormous, winged quadruped, on beating pinions bore him on so fast. The lightning flash, by summer's tempest shed, by such velocity would be surpassed. All other birds by it would be outsped. All creatures racing it would be outclassed. Scarcely the arrow or the thunderbolt hurtles to earth, I think, with swifter jolt. 19. When the bird, unswerving in its flight, had travelled on, traversing many a mile, weaving wide circles, weary now of height, it hovered low at last above an isle, just such a place where Arethusa might have lingered in concealment for a while, when she had caused her lover grievous pain, and underneath the sea had passed in vain. 20. No lovelier isle, no pleasanter it knew, in all its many journeys through the air, nor, even had it searched the whole world through, would the great bird have found a land more fair. One last wide circle in the sky it drew, then with Ruggiero it alighted where, mid cultivated plains and rounded hills, lush meadows, shadowed banks and sparkling rills. 21. Welcoming groves of laurel, cool and soft, of palm and myrtle, fragrant and most sweet, and orange trees and cedar gently wafted their perfume, as their fruit and flowers meet, in myriad lovely forms which twine aloft, a leafy shelter from the summer's heat. Among the branches, flying unafraid, the nightingales a dulcet music made. 22. Among the roses which cool breezes keep for ever fresh, and lilies white as snow, the airs and conies confidently leap, and proudly antered stags unhurried go, fearing no trap or hunter in the deep recesses of the wood, or when with slow and peaceful gaze they ruminate. Goats frisk, and every creature frolics without risk. 23. While the winged horse had been approaching land, Ruggiero from a certain height had seen that it was safe to leave the saddle, and so found himself on the enamelled green. He kept the bridle firmly in his hand, then to a myrtle, which he found between a laurel and a pine, he tied the beast, for to secure it to the earth seemed best. 24. Not far away he saw a spring set round with cedars and date-bearing palms. He drew his helm and gauntlets off, and on the ground near by set down his shield. Next, on the view of sea and hills, he gazed in turn. The sound of caressing breeze which gently blew released a joyful murmuring and stir among the beech trees, tops, and those of fir. 25. From time, to cool his burning lips, over the plashing fountain, clear as glass, he bends, and from the crystal water sips, to subdue the fire which his cuirass has kindled in his veins. His hands he dips and splashes in the pool. No wonder, as, without a pause, and armed as for a tourney, 3,000 miles he travelled on his journey. 26. And as he tarries there, the hippogriff, which he has tied among the shady brakes, begins to kick and rear and plunge, as if it chid at some strange lurking form. It shakes the myrtle, so that every bough and leaf tosses and twists, and round about it makes a carpet of the mutilated fronds, and even so it cannot break its bonds. 27. As when a log of wood which once was green, of which the path has shriveled, leaving spaces where sappy softness formerly has been, is thrown upon the flames, whose warm embraces convert to roars and groans the air within, as though the hollow aperture it races, so does that injured myrtle moan and shriek, as though the splitting bark it tries to speak. 28. A plaintive voice, no longer thus confined, issues at last articulate and clear, and said, If you are courteous and kind, as from your noble aspect you appear, this creature from my tree, I pray, unbind. The sufferings I undergo is drear and harsh enough. Let it not be increased by the infliction of this restless beast. 29. Ruggiero, startled by this anguished cry, in great astonishment at once turned round, and on his senses scarcely dared rely. He scrambled to his feet, and with one bound the hippogriff he hurried to untie. And when at last the power of speech he found, O human soul, or woodland sprite, he said, I pray you, pardon me, and blushed bright red. 30. Since I was unaware that you reside, a living spirit, hidden in this bark, I tethered my winged charger to your side, which on your fronds has sadly left its mark. But do not leave me thus unsatisfied. I pray you, do not keep me in the dark, but tell me who you are. Ah, do not fail, as you may sheltered be from snow and hail. 31. If now or ever I can make amends to compensate you for the damage done by her who holds my fate in her fair hands, and of my soul is the custodian, I swear that I will labor to such ends, you will have cause to bless me. Whereupon, as soon as brave Ruggiero ceased to speak, from tip to root the bush began to shake. 32. Along the rugged bark a moisture oozed, as when from green firebrand the sap, yielding at last to the fierce heat, is loosed through many a tiny orifice or gap, and into sound converted, then disclosed the story of a spirit's sad mishap. By words so courteous I am induced to say by whom and why I'm thus reduced. 33. Astolfo Astolfo was my name, a paladin of France, and on the battlefield much feared. Orlando and Rinaldo are my kin. As cousinly companions we were reared. After my father Otto, I was next in line as King of England, so it appeared. Handsome and debonair, by many loved, my own worst enemy at last I proved. 34. Returning from that archipelago which waters of the Indian Ocean lave, upon the east where I with Rinaldo and others were imprisoned in a cave, whence we were rescued, as perhaps you know, by the supreme endeavors of the brave Orlando, we traveled on towards the west, along the lands by northern tempest vexed. 35. Led on our weary way by cruel fate, We came one morning to a lovely strand, where stood near by the castle and estate of fair Alcinia, ruler of that land. She issued at that moment from her gate. Alone upon the shore we saw her stand. Without a net, without a hook, she fished, making as many catches as she wished. 36. The dolphins at her call came quickly leaping. The tunnies floundered, grasping at her feet. Sperm whales and seals were startled from their sleeping. Mullet and salmon, pleasurable to eat, crowd in their hundreds, higher and higher heaping. Pistresses with the oars swim forth to meet the philisters and the grampuses, the whales in bulk gigantic with thrashing tails. 37. We see one mighty whale larger than all the whales that ever swam in any sea, from the surface plainly visible, rising at least 11 paces. We, as to a man, in one air fall, for, lying motionless, it seems to be an island of proportions vast and wide, as from afar we scan it, side to side. 38. Alcinia drew the fishes from the waters, by words and charm of which she knew the worth. She and the Fay Morgana both were daughters of the same parents, whether at one birth I know not, and both sisters of King Arthur's. Alcinia looked at me, and showed no dearth of cunning. In such things she's skilled enough, as from the other knights she cut me off. 39. She came towards us with a gracious smile, with courteous manner and disarming speech, and said, "Brave knights, pray linger here a while. Allow me to conduct you from this beach. To my abode I'll take you and beguile you with my fish menagerie, of which I have a great variety, as bright and countless as the myriad stars of night." 40. And if a siren some of you would care to meet, who with sweet singing calms the sea, explore that territory over there, where at this time of day she's wont to be. She pointed to the whale, and I, who dare all enterprises with serenity, and I have bitter reason now to rue it, without a moment's pause, crossed over to it. 41. Rinaldo and Dudone quickly signed to me that I should look before I leap. To no avail, for of her fell design I'm now a captive, lost upon the deep. Alcinia laughs, her eyes with triumph shine. The whale which knows her purpose does not keep her waiting, but swims rapidly away, far from the mainland, to my great dismay. 42. Rinaldo flung himself into the ocean to try and rescue me. He may have drowned, for there arose a furious commotion, stirred by the wind, and darkness wrapped us round. So what became of him I have no notion. Ways of consoling me Alcinia found, and all that day and the ensuing night she kept me in her company or sight.